Hello everyone and welcome to SEW-EURODRIVE's How-To series. We're going to be discussing how to maintain and take care of your product. So let's get into it. Today we're going to talk about how to change the oil in your gear motor. Now before we get started, let's deal with some of the environmental impacts and regulations that we need to follow. Those are rules that are local to your area when it comes to how to dispose of waste oil and how to store the oil that you're going to be using to refill your units. Also, it's important before you begin any work that you've de-energized the system, that you've followed any proper lockout tagout procedures, and that you have all the proper PPE in place for this type of procedure. So before we get started on the procedure to change the oil in a gearbox, let's talk about some basics when it comes to oil. Oil has a finite life. That means that it's going to expire just like the milk in your refrigerator. In order to know how long your oil is going to last, it's important to factor in two key things. First, oil is going to lose its lifetime quicker if it's under a lot of heat. When you look at the heat and the second component, time, as those things go up, then your oil is going to lose its life and its ability to protect the components inside of your gearbox. That's why there's so many variables there to say, well, your gearbox needs an oil change here or there. And while we do recommend 10,000 hours for general mineral oil and 20,000 hours for synthetic oil, it's very important that you monitor your systems to know exactly when you should change your oil. That's why you should always be checking your oil in your gearboxes to see, does it smell burnt? Is the oil level too low? Those type of conditions are going to key you in on what you should be doing when it comes to oil replacement. In addition to that, it's very important that you use only SEW compatible oil. Now, SEW-EURODRIVE does market and sell their own oil, as you see displayed here to my right. But it's okay if you want to use a different type of oil. Just make sure you consult our technical documentation and catalogs to ensure that you are using an oil that is compatible. This is especially important if you're removing the old oil and putting new oil in, as if they are not compatible, then you could have some disastrous consequences. So where do we begin? Well, it starts with looking at our nameplate on our unit. SEW-EURODRIVE gear motors have a nameplate on the motor and also on the gearbox. And that nameplate has the type of oil, and it also tells you the mounting position that this unit will be at so that you know how much of that type of oil you need to add. Now let's talk about draining the oil in your unit. For today's demonstration, I'm using a unit that already has no oil in it, whereas you will probably have a unit in the field that has actual oil in it. Let's talk about how you should do it at your site. It's very important that you follow all the environmental regulations and that you ensure that no spillage occurs and that you have the proper receptacle to dispose of that oil. And if possible, you want to try to remove that gearbox from the equipment so that you have more access to the unit to do the drain and the fill. But if you don't have that ability, it's okay to fill it in place. You just need to make sure that you have access to the highest point and the lowest point of your gearbox. So for instance, this gearbox, the highest point as it's mounted at M1 would be here, and the lowest point would be down here where I'm pointing my finger. Now to begin draining your oil, you want to have that bucket underneath your lowest point. You're going to open up one of your points at the top, and that way your oil will flow out smoothly. One point of caution, the bigger the gearbox, the more oil you have and the more pressure that could be present. So when you open up that drain plug, you may have a jet of oil coming at you. It's important to keep that in mind when you're removing that oil plug. Once you've ensured that all of the oil is drained from the gearbox, it's time to put the new oil in. Again, you want to make sure you're using the correct oil and that you've determined what the proper amount is. SEW-EURODRIVE lists the exact amount for every mounting position and every gear motor type that there is that we provide. However, in your situation, you may not have the ability to measure out the amount of oil that you need. And that's why SEW-EURODRIVE has designed their gearboxes to conveniently have oil plugs where the oil level should be. And I'm going to pivot this gearbox around so you can see for this particular unit, that oil level plug would be down here where my finger is pointing. Now, what you would do is you would fill the unit with oil and make sure you have the drain plug in. Remember that. You're going to fill this unit with oil until it reaches that point there. When you're doing this, give it a chance to settle. There could be air pockets that would allow the oil to give you a false sense of the right level, and it would not be there. Once you've determined that everything's settled and you've reached that level, go ahead and put that level plug back in, and now it's time to put your breather or your fill plug back into place, and you're ready to re-energize your unit and get going again. Now that we've completed the explanation on how to change your oil properly, let's just go over a few reminders. First and foremost, please remember to put the oil back into the unit and that you've put all the plugs and breathers into the correct locations. You never want to start a unit up without any oil. Second, you want to make sure that you avoid any type of contamination. Contamination is the death of oil. Contamination causes bearings and seals to fail. So it's vital that you keep a clean environment. Wipe away any of the areas where you're filling in the oil so that no contamination or dirt goes into the gearbox when you're putting that new oil in. As always, remember, you can cite our technical documentation and our operating instructions to know exactly what type of oil you should use and for reminders on how to do a proper oil change on SEW-EURODRIVE product. If you're interested in learning more about SEW-EURODRIVE's components, products, or solutions, please go to SEW-EURODRIVE.com. Together, we drive the world.